Hey folks, one of the most important things you can do actually to improve your watercolor painting is to plan ahead and actually to plan your composition. It's one of the toughest things to get used to doing. It took me a long time before I would really do this before I was painting. But once I did, it actually improved my paintings. I was much happier with my results. We're going to get you started on that today by learning how to do thumbnail sketches, value sketches, where we figure out what shapes we're going to use in our painting, and we're going to decide what values are going to be in those shapes. That is, how light or dark the colors that we put on those shapes will be. We're going to work with some really simple examples in this video just to get you started, just to get you used to the process so that you can actually move on from these a little bit later. So anyway, let's get into this video, learn how to do these value sketches, and really help you start improving those paintings. You might have heard other instructors in classes or workshops or perhaps in other videos refer to value sketches, and you may have seen them before. They look like these. But what exactly is a value sketch? Well, the first thing, what a value sketch is not a drawing study of a subject like this one. So this is a drawing of a boat that I did some years ago. And I did a line drawing and then I added value to it. Now the values that I added in this drawing, I added them where I saw them on the subject. And that's perfectly fine for a drawing. If you're doing a study, if you're doing a drawing of a subject and or you're just trying to study the subject to perhaps include it later in a different painting, that's perfectly fine. But the purpose of a value sketch like this, or a thumbnail sketch, is really twofold. And one is to help you learn to divide up your picture plane, the space that you're actually going to do your painting in. Divide that space up with essentially large mass shapes like this. This little thumbnail actually has no value in it at this point. It's just a set of shapes that I've put on paper in a way that I think actually is fairly nice and fairly pleasing and could turn into a nice value composition, which again then could turn into a nice painting. So I've divided up the picture plane here with this. I've divided up the space, but then the next step in that is to add value to those big shapes to determine how I would go about painting this in color and what values I would have in certain areas of the painting in certain of those shapes once I got to my painting. This is really three different explorations of kind of the same subject. You can see there's a stream that flows, in this one it's very clear to see the stream, which I've left white, flowing through this forest, and that's really what the painting would be about. And I've experimented with different values in different places on particularly these two studies. And you can see that I've limited myself actually to in this case, it looks like three values, white and kind of a mid-value gray, and then a dark gray or a black. In this case, it looks like four, white and a light gray, kind of a mid-value gray here and in the background, and a black, dark gray or a black here on this distant piece of land that sticks out into the stream. And that's essentially what a value sketch is. It's that simple. We divide up our plane into big shapes, and then we place values in those shapes to come up with a pleasing, dynamic composition that we can transfer to watercolor paper and then paint in color. So to do this, it's really not difficult, but to do this, we're going to run through some exercises, a really simple exercise showing a very simple way to divide up that initially, as if you're getting used to these for the first time, dividing up that space in essentially to three planes of space, and then applying three different values to those planes in an attempt really to come up with a nice value arrangement for the painting that you might do from it. So let's go do those exercises. You'll see what that process is all about, and then you'll be able to work on those on your own. You're going to need this layout as well, actually three of them. You can download it from the button below. and then freehand them in your sketchbook or on your loose leaf paper. If you need to trace it, you can do that if you've got a light table, or you can put it on a window and just trace it there on the window. Anyway, download these and get them drawn, 3 of them on your piece of paper, and we'll get going. So to get started on our value sketch, our thumbnail sketch, we're going to start with something like this, and again, hopefully you've got them drawn by now. And we're going to work in this thumbnail sketch really with 3 values. We're going to put some light value, and actually what that means is we're going to leave some white paper. And we're going to have some dark value, and we're going to have some areas that are mid value, which is basically gray. And actually if you look in my original drawing, these areas are gray. They're mid value. They're something between white and black. And that's what we're going to work with first. Now I've got this drawn with 5 big shapes showing. This one here in the middle, these 2, a mountain and a sky in the background, a shape here that represents this field to the left, and then this shape represents actually the road and the field that's to the right in the drawing, those 2 shapes. But we're really going to deal with 3 values, and actually to simplify this, I really want us to think in terms of foreground, middle ground, and background. It's the easiest way to do it, particularly if you're new to this. It's the easiest way to sort of think about the value shapes without getting too complicated. So that's what we're going to do, and we're essentially going to do our 3 exercises. I've got them here, the 3 exercises. We're going to do those by essentially trying white, black, and mid value in certain areas, and we're going to change those in the next one, and we're going to change them again in the third one. I do have my initial sketch out here for reference to begin with. Now we're not going to need it. Once we get our first one done, we really won't need this, and I'll move it out of the way. But to begin with, we can start with something like this, particularly if you're wondering where to start, if this is new to you and you're, gee, how do I get this going? I've simplified my shapes. It looks really funny. It's very abstract actually at this point. How do I get started? Well, again, the first thing we're going to think about is foreground, middle ground, and background. So the first thing we're going to do is I will refer to my drawing, and in the drawing you can see that what I've got here is a big mid-value shape actually, kind of in the middle, which is where the barn is, in the little hillock, and everything else I really didn't put, I drew it, but I didn't really put value in them. So that's a good place to start, and let's do that by placing our mid-value first. So we're going to leave the dark, and obviously some of this is going to stay white, but we're going to put mid-value in the same area that I have it on this drawing, which is back here around, actually on the hillock and the barn. So let's put that in. I like to do it like this. Now my pencil is running over those edges, but that's okay. By the way, one of the things I want to emphasize, when I do this in my workshops and classes, I have the class do it, I often get people being really indecisive about these value shapes. You know, I'll say, well, where's your value shape? It's here. I'm going to put mid value. And they'll do something like this. And it's really not enough. First of all, it's not dark enough. But secondly, it doesn't fill in the shape completely. You really want to fill in that shape completely. By doing that, you're going to get a real great sense of the abstract shapes that you've created out of this more complex subject. So there's the first step. We get that in. And now we can actually very clearly see the shape of the barn, the hill, the shape of the barn, the outline of it, essentially. And then this little piece of land back here in the background. And it's one nice connected value shape. Again, I've gone edge to edge. I've made sure the value fills in the entire area, as if, if this was a real volume, I turn it this way and pour liquid into it. It would fill it up completely. And that's what you want to do with your value areas. Now that we've got that, we're kind of looking at this it sort of looks like our drawing, doesn't it? So we've got this mid-value shape sitting in amongst what's really now connected as one big white shape. See that? So it would be very light or white. It wouldn't be white in our painting, but it would be very, very light colors. And actually, this would not be necessarily a bad composition. But for this exercise, I do want to get some dark values in there. And as I said, we're going to divide this into foreground, middle ground, and background. So the next decision is, where do we put our dark? Because we're going to leave some of this white. That's going to be our light shape. So our dark shape has got to be either the foreground or the background. And I'm really, I think, inclined to put the dark shape in the foreground. Now you can see I'm doing the same thing. This is a much simpler shape. I still have my 2B pencil, and I'm working in there, and obviously I'm bearing down on it so that I get a much darker value this time around. And I'm going to work from the left all the way to the right to get dark value in all of this foreground shape. I've got it all in there. Now I'm just really finishing up by, again, filling up that shape, making sure I get that value consistent along all of the edges of that shape. So actually quickly and easily, I've got this value composition done. Again, having separated my composition into 3 areas, foreground, middle ground, and background, and then applying value actually to 2 of them, a dark value in the foreground and a middle value, a mid-gray, into the middle ground. So that's one way we can do this. And actually, this would work out nicely as a composition for a finished painting. But to continue the exercise, I'm going to move my original sketch out of the way. And to continue the exercise, we're going to go and do 2 more. So I've got the first one, and we're going to do 2 more. And this time, we're going to change where we have these different value areas. And in the second one, what I want to do, in the first one, we left the background, both the mountain and the sky, very light. And in the second one, I'm going to put my mid-value back in the background. And it's the same process. First of all, I'm going to fill that up. So I get my value all the way over here to the edge. Now I've left some white edges. We'll go back and get those. But I'm getting that value in there. And then again, I am filling it up. That means I'm bringing it to all of the edges. So there's my mid-value, which covers, in this case, actually 2 shapes. It covers the shape that's supposed to be the distant mountain as well as the sky. I think for this value arrangement, what I'd like to do is leave my middle area, my middle ground, white this time. It'll be my light value. So that means, again, we come down to the ground plane down here, and we put in our darker value. So now we have 2 value sketches of our simple composition done. And as you look at them, you can see actually very kind of different moods, can't you? The mood of this one versus the mood of that one. Perhaps the time of day. It looks like a different time of day between this one and that one. So just by arranging these big shapes and using only 3 values, white and middle gray, and this is not really black here, but it's dark. By doing that, we're able already to see differences in this composition, at least in terms of the mood that we might be setting in our painting when we do it that way. And then finally, we'll go down to our 3rd little thumbnail down here at the bottom. And again, we will practice by changing which shapes get which values in this one. So this time around, I think I'm inclined to put, believe it or not, dark in the background. So this is unusual, right? Because we don't think of skies as being dark unless it's nighttime or there's a storm. We don't think of that. but let's try this anyway. So there's our dark. Now again, our background, we would wonder why it would look so dark, particularly the sky, but that's the way we were designing our value sketch at this point. And maybe it's not a painting we do, but it gives us an opportunity to experiment with this value arrangement. So the next thing now is to determine where we're going to put our mid value. Will it be in the middle ground, the shape that includes the barn itself, or will it be in the foreground? My inclination actually is to put it in the foreground. So I get my gray into the foreground, and again, now that we've got these three value sketches done, we suddenly see real different things emerging, right? We see a different looking scene here, here, and here. This one, obviously, with that dark background, starts to make us think of nighttime, or at least late in the evening, twilight, when the hills are getting dark, the sky is getting dark, and then for some reason that barn and the ground around it is getting lit up with something while we have this mid-value area in the foreground. Now once you've done a few of these, would you actually do paintings of them? Perhaps not, but that's part of the value actually of a thumbnail or a value sketch, is that you get a chance to work out compositional ideas before you get to that expensive piece of paper, which is going to take you a long time actually to paint on and develop. This gives you a chance to do some of that planning work, work out problems that you might have, particularly with the value and the shape arrangements, before you get to those, actually to that more expensive piece of paper and that intimidating moment in time when you're facing that blank piece of paper with a brush in hand. Try this exercise maybe more than once. Maybe draw a few more, try some other arrangements, and keep working at it. By the way, you can do these in watercolor if you're so inclined. Now this is a different scene, but you can do value sketches in watercolor if you like. They actually take longer because usually you're going to want to let some of these washes dry before you keep working on them. And you're also using a relatively expensive piece of paper versus that cheap sort of bond paper that you find in sketchbooks or that you might have in loose leaf. But give it a try, whether you want to do it in watercolor or pencil. Either way, do give it a try. Work on these. Kind of begin to make it part of your practice and part of your routine when you're setting up to do a painting. They'll really help you out, really help you see both shape and value, and help you learn to divide up that picture plane in very dynamic ways.